Japan has unveiled its biggest overhaul of defense export rules in decades. Restrictions on overseas arms sales are being scrapped, opening the way for exports of warships, missiles, and other weapons. The policy change has divided public opinion and angered China.
Since the end of the Second World War, Japan's security policy has been shaped by pacifism and restraint. The military, known as the Self-Defense Forces, has been low-key, playing only a limited, non-aggressive role. The lifting of the ban on weapons exports comes as Japan bolsters its defences, which it says is necessary to counter any threat from an expansionist China.
It's becoming increasingly difficult for every country to protect its peace and security alone, as regional threats have grown. This latest policy shift will help friendly nations enhance our defense capabilities and prevent conflicts.
Not surprisingly, Japan's decision to scrap restrictions on weapons exports has brought an angry response from Beijing.
China is seriously concerned about this matter. In the past, Japanese militarism engaged in rampant aggression and expansion, committing heinous crimes against China and its Asian neighbours. Japan's recent series of dangerous moves in the military and security fields have exposed its self-proclaimed status as a peaceful nation and a country adhering to a policy of self-defense. Many experts and scholars are concerned that Japan is restarting its war machine and exporting war abroad.
The Yasukuni Shrine in Tokyo honours Japan's war dead, but is seen by many as a symbol of militarism. There are mixed views on weapons exports.
I think it's a good idea for Japan to show the world its defence capability. So while this is a bold move, I support it.
I hope Japan, as the only country ever hit by a nuclear bomb, will continue to uphold its stance of relinquishing weapons and opposing wars.
Japan's defence partners, including Australia, have largely welcomed the decision to lift export restrictions, although some controls remain and lethal weapons will not be supplied to countries at war.
Taku Tamaki is a lecturer in international relations at Loughborough University. He specializes in the political dynamics of the Asia-Pacific. Welcome to DW. Now, how do you expect Japan's turn away from its pacifist tradition to affect its standing on the world stage?
I think this is an interesting case of, the potential controversy is in the eyes of the beholder. I'm sure the Chinese have already mentioned how they're dissatisfied with that, and domestically too. I could imagine some civic societies raising alarm about this. But given the larger geopolitical context in which the middle powers are pretty much asked to be on their own, especially looking at the stance of the Trump administration, it is not surprising for the Japanese government as a middle power reliant on American alliance, but Trump administration seems to be walking away from wanting to enhance further strategic partnership with other middle powers. So within that larger context, I'm not too sure if it is Japan walking away from pacifism per se. I mean, this is almost a philosophical question. Looking at it from a very superficial perspective, it might look like Japan is walking away, but does this mean that Japan is trying to bring war to other countries? No, that is not the case.
It is important to note that Australia and Japan just signed a multi-billion-dollar warship deal over the weekend. Tell us, how significant is Japan's military complex for the region?
It is I think it's a significant agreement in a sense that it is for the Japanese government to again show that it is very interested and enthusiastic about forging strategic partnerships. Yvette Cooper, the Foreign Secretary of UK, has visited Japan very recently and mentioned something similar. So within that larger context, and again, it's almost within the context of how the Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney talked about middle powers having to forge alliance in February at Davos, or the French President Emmanuel Macron saying something similar. I think we need to look at Japan-Australia agreement within that context. It is really about Japan and Australia sharing the anxieties about China's rise in the region and some of the uncertainties about U.S. alliance with its allies coming together, forging a partnership. And it is from a more technical perspective, it is really about trying to forge interoperability between Japanese and Australian forces.
Yeah. You mentioned it earlier, China is not happy about this. Beijing has announced it will resolutely resist what it calls moves toward a new type of militarism. What could that look like?
This is very much a Beijing playbook. It is not so much a new language coming out of the Chinese Communist Party since last November when Takaichi made that statement about Taiwan. In the diet, China has been upping the ante. So this is very much part of that. It is one thing for the Chinese to mention or say all these things about Japan becoming a militarist and that Japan needs to learn the lessons of the past. It's quite another for the Asian neighbors, let alone Japan's potential strategic partners, to be actually buying that language. So again, I think we just have to take it with a loads of salt, as it were, and treat it as what it is. Basically, it's a Chinese propaganda to try to delegitimize Japan's moves.
Then we just saw Takaichi send an offering to the Yasukuni shrine, and that adds to the strained relation, really, between China and Japan. How big are tensions between the two countries at this point in time?
It's, I think, at one of the lowest moments in history, and I think this will continue for a while. Now, Takaichi did send an offering, but she had said that she will not be attending the religious ceremony, which I think is pragmatic on her part. And despite some of the misgivings some people might have had about Takaichi being an ultra-nationalist, so far she has been very pragmatic, not sending Japanese officials to the Takeshima Memorial Day and having a very good relationship so far with the South Korean president. So far, so pragmatic.
Do you expect China to use this change in policy by the Japanese government as a pretext to continue its massive military buildup?
I don't really think they need much pretext per se. I'm sure they'll talk about this and justify what they're using, given this development. I'm not too sure whether this will presage any change in the Chinese policy. They'll keep on keeping on, but I'm sure they'll use this as one of many other justifications for what they're doing.
Taku Tamaki, thank you so much for your insights. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you very much.